On today's episode, we throw all our new handling components into the NX2000. Welcome back to the Auto Obsessive Garage. Chadwick with you again for another installment of Project NX2K. That's our 1993 Nissan NX2000. Last week you guys saw us tear out all the handling components. We took out the old control arms, outer tie rods, sway bars, end links, and the strut assembly. This week we're putting new shiny bits in. You don't want to miss that. This thing's going to be a handling machine. Let's get in the garage and get a little dirty. So after getting the control arm and all the other stuff out of there, the first thing I like to put in is the actual coil over or strut assembly if you're doing that, the exact same methodology. But just put the three little nuts on top to hold the coilover in place, then slide the hub onto the coilover where it connects right here with these two large bolts. I've got both through, but I don't have them torqued up yet. And that way you have something secure. And it's pretty straightforward. And then we just got to put everything back, right? We need a control arm, we need an outer tie rod, we need an end link for our sway bar, and we'll be able to button this back up, but that's how it looks. Of course, we're going to do brakes. Don't judge me on these old brakes. But once you get that in there, I like to leave those top three nuts loose, so they're finger tight now, so we have a little play in the coilover, and that allows us to get these bolts perfectly through those holes. Running these bolts through the coilover, pretty straightforward, 17, so I just put a 17-inch wrench on one end. Run it down with my impact. Now obviously I'm going to go back and use a socket and ratchet to get it to the exact torque spec, but for now that works. You might have also noticed I took the brake caliper off, and that's just so I can put more weight against this to hold it in place and to jack it up. Using a floor jack is a good way to get this back up into this coilover perch to get those two bolt holes lined up, because it can be pretty hard to force it up even without a control arm on there. It's just a lot of weight and it's awkward with the axle swinging around. So I'm just going to leave that off. We're doing brake pads and rotors anyway, but it just made that job a little easier, something to be aware of. I did keep the rotor there just because it is something hard to jack against. You don't want to bend your dust shield. I've seen so many dust shields where you get a slight bend in it, it makes a horrible noise and you think something's critically wrong, but it's just that dust shield. So let's keep putting this together. Let's make sure to tighten those three nuts up top. Next up, we're going to install that lower control arm. Now, I like to do the large bolt that goes through here first. Then we'll do that kind of sandwich section right here. And then last but not least, we'll get that ball joint section up through the knuckle. Of course, you want to compare it to the old control arm, make sure everything lines up. With this installation, we go in this direction. So here's your brand new ball joint. How much better does that look? So you're obviously taking this nut off, taking off this plastic protector piece, and you see our new boot. Already pre-greased, not slit open, not leaking everywhere, already in far better shape. You've got this huge rubber bushing here that gets stuck between that plate, that sandwich plate, and then here's where the large bolt passes through, and that's the one I like to do first. Let's get it in. Last but not least, we have to get this ball joint, and you want to go very slow with this part. You don't want to ever force anything. When you're using a floor jack, you can lift quite a bit. So you don't want to just bogart this thing up. Here's a little secret, because there's not enough space between this nut, as I remember, and the end of the axle. So what you're going to want to do is start the nut before you get it pressed all the way through. Next up, we got our outer tie rod. Pretty important piece we need to add on there. And then the end link for our sway bar. We are keeping that big beefy sway bar in the front. We're not upgrading it. It's big enough as it is. We'll put a new end link on there so it's nice and tight. Next up on our suspension list, we've got the outer tie rod here, which needs to go on. You can see here, brand new boot, already filled with grease. That's nice, brand new cotter pin to lock it in place. We're gonna go ahead and screw this in. If you marked your inner tie rod and didn't replace that, we should be ballpark. Obviously this car will need a very serious alignment after we do all these suspension components. So don't skip it on that, guys. Don't drive like that. Not good for your new tires and everything else. So easy peasy here with the outer tie rod. We're just gonna go ahead and spin him on. You can bend it a little bit, should have a little play in it. And you can move your knuckle a little bit too to allow it to drop in. There we go. We'll go ahead and put this castle nut on here and put our new cotter pin through. And if you do it right, your cotter pin should go right through. Like so. Just bend the ends on the other side to lock it in place. And we're done with that outer tie rod. Our final piece of the suspension puzzle is a new sway bar end link. These go a long way into firming up how your handling is in the corners. End links, when they get worn out, you get a little bit of looseness, sometimes a lot of clunking if the rubber or the bushing has completely failed. We're trying to tighten this thing up with all this new suspension. It's gonna be important to have. Look at that shiny new sway bar end link. We'll install that. Now we have a little play in our sway bar because I was smart enough to disconnect the bracket that holds it. So we should be able to get this installed to replace that stock worn out one. A little top tip with getting this end link in. I actually went and loosened both brackets on both sides, and that gives you a lot of wiggle room to reach it into that control arm and get it all tightened up. And then you can just redo the brackets after. So top tip there, guys. Let's just take in all the new shiny bits we have installed. We got our new coilovers there. Those are looking real good right here in front of us. Outer tie rod, looking nice and shiny. Down below you can see that right in focus now. You can see the new sway bar end link. Below that you can see the brand new control arm we installed. Everything's looking real good, real nice and shiny. A lot of new componentry under here. Definitely need a big alignment. Get everything dialed in as we like it. But boy, this suspension, a lot of work in here, but those fresh bushings and all new hardware is really gonna pay off. Time to put our coilover in. The first thing I like to do is work it up through the top mount area and put a couple nuts on there to secure it in place, and then we'll connect the rest of it. Now when I tighten up those 3 nuts up there, I leave a little bit of slack so you have some play in the coilover. And that's gonna help us when we go to line up or the hub assembly. You can lift this, it's kind of a pain in the butthole, but I like to use a floor jack, just like we did in the front, kind of raise it up, get it into this area, and then we'll slide our bolts through. Slow and steady with that. You don't want to bend your top mounting bolts or studs on your suspension, so just nice and easy and straight. That's why I left a little slack in here so you can adjust. Yep, slide the bolts through. That's how you know you got it. And don't forget to tighten those nuts all the way to spec. And now it's sway bar time. Here we have our old sway bar removed from the car, and our new one you can see is a little bit larger in diameter, should help us with a little more rear focused handling. You can see that it does look a little different here, and I think that's because the white line unit actually goes down under the exhaust and not over it like the stock unit. So that's actually an easier install design. So hopefully that's what I'm seeing there, but let's get that new one in the car. On our new white line sway bars, we are gonna be reusing this bracket and screws. We are gonna take this old, worn out, cracked bushing out and replace it with the white line unit. So you just basically have to pop this metal right off. I don't know if I can, and I can even do it one-handed. Here's what we're reusing, guys. This old, look how worn out this bushing is. It's all cracked. Here's a side-by-side of what the new white line unit looks like. All right, let's set up these new sway bars. So I wanted to share with you guys something interesting as far as the end links go for our rear sway bar here. Now, the white line kit does come with these fairly highly adjustable eyelet style ones, but it's not gonna work with our coilovers because the coilovers, instead of having a kind of horizontal eyelet to mount up through, has a vertical one. So the actual end link has to go through, which is kind of interesting. Now, I don't know if I have that on camera. Let me, a little better angle. You can see it up here near on the strut tower brace or on the coilover. So what is interesting is the coilovers did come with these adjustable end links that do work with the sway bar and the coil over. So that's what I'm going to use. They're very long, but it looks like this mounting point for the end link can be adjusted up and down with 2 Allen keys. So I'm going to put the end link at the bottom on the sway bar first, and then we'll adjust that to get the right vertical height. Okay, I've got that sway bar end link on. You can see it's pretty long here. Also, I double checked to make sure I wasn't hitting the sway bar on the muffler, which is something you need to pay attention to on the other side, and also that you're not hitting any other suspension components, braking components, because that'll make a horrible noise and not be pleasant when you drive. So I think I'm good there. Obviously, when I set the ride height, I'll probably come back and have to tweak the sway bars a little bit. But for now, they look good to go. Everything's really tight, as it should be. You shouldn't have any play in your sway bars, because that defeats the purpose, because they're anti-sway bars. And if they have movement in them, it's not going to stop anything from swaying. So that side looks good. I'm going to repeat it on the other side, and we should be good to go with the rear sway bar installed. With all our new handling components installed, it's time to get the NX2000 to a quality alignment shop to get an alignment, corner balance, and our brand new tires mounted up. We're getting there, guys. I'll catch you on the next one.